ahead.
We have Bent Njal Saga here, the second public reading.
All right.
This was actually, the draft was lost for over 20 years, and Fred discovered it in one of my bins up in the rafters of the barn. Bless his heart. So, this is the successor to Beowabbit. Bent Njal Saga, translated by, this will take about 20 minutes, translated by Bruce Edward Blackistone. Recent editions. Haha. Bent Njal Saga is a story of epic proportions, beginning with his grandfather, who was born in obscurity a little south of Trondheim, and ending with his grandson, who dies there. The story of these 5 generations spans a period of adventure and exploration, of conquest, war, pestilence, and death. The family is unique in the Viking Age in that it changed little and accomplished nothing. In truth, their role seems to be to obstruct and hinder more well-known historical figures. Why the family line did not meet extinction sooner than it did is a mystery to scholars and historians, none of whom have looked into the problem. The story sweeps from the threshold of the New World to the fabled mosaic floors of Constantinople, but it seems to spend most of its time where the lands and the people are a lot colder and nastier. As the epitome of the Viking spirit reflected in the medieval saga writing tradition, we could recommend half a dozen others, more carefully crafted, more easily read, more historically accurate. But for those who have a taste for the obscure and bizarre, or are desperate for a theme for a term paper or thesis, we recommend that you not waste your time. Introduction. Bent Njal Saga was written sometime between 991 and 1991 by one...
Oh, sorry.
And then the lights went out. Did your battery die?
Nope.
Oh.
My screen turned off.
It corrupted.
I went to 15% battery and it
Yeah.
decided it was done. Whoa. Hey you. Stop it.
Right here. Save the phone battery.
A thing. Here.
I have an external battery. I can plug it in.
Here.
Or we can just use the thing.
There we go.
Whoa.
It was on.
Or we can just use the thing.
I didn't think it was that bad.
Buttons are advanced technology, okay?
So many buttons.
Okay, Bent Njal Saga was written sometime between 991 and 1991 by one Bjarni Bogason, or possibly someone else. Bjarni the Sleaze, as he was known, although he might have been someone else, indulged in saga writing as a way of getting back at his more powerful and successful neighbors. Although his ending is as obscure as his beginnings, he was allegedly murdered by unanimous consent at a horse fight after insulting the parties involved, including the horses. He may or may not be buried at Thingvellir Borg or at sea in the middle of Hjamsfjord, and possibly in all 3 places, either simultaneously or sequentially. Bent Njal Saga is substantially his only known work, assuming he wrote it at all. The saga itself survives principally in the form of several large pieces of vellum cut as a pattern for an unknown woman's intimate apparel. Had this woman not been of such great dimensions, substantially more of the saga would have been lost. Such are the roles of fashion and fate in history and literature.
That's amazing.
This edition of the saga will probably never be translated back into its native Icelandic, since the English-speaking world desires no resumption of the Cod War. Footnote 1. Cod War, not Cold War, Time Magazine, March 8, 1976. And most Icelanders have lived in comfortable ignorance of its existence for over 1,000 years or less. It was in the days of King Harald Fairhair, the son of Halfdan the Black, the son of Gudrud the Hunter, the son of Halfdan the Mild and Stingy, the son of Eystein Fart, the son of Olaf the Woodcutter, king of the Swedes, footnote 2. This remarkable genealogy was apparently swiped from another of the sagas. Icelandic reckoning contends that King Olaf Fairhair died possibly in 931 or 32, or maybe not at all. That is an actual genealogy.
Hey,
Okay.
Barbara, I think your phone's still on in your pocket.
It was in those days that Eyjol the Squinty was born in obscurity a little south of Trondheim Lake. At his birth, he winked at his mother, causing her to cry out so loudly that his eyes stayed that way. His father, nevertheless, took him on his knee, sprinkled water on him, and gave him his name. Then went Viking in England, where he stayed, taking another wife and raising many more children more promising than Eyjol. Eyjol's mother, Thora Shipsbottom, went back to her father, bringing her husband's land of little extent into the family. Ibjal was given as a foster child to Einar Ofsson, the son of Ulf. Burnings. When Ibjal was 7 summers, When Ibjal was 7 summers, Einar's house burned down. The next summer, his shieling, footnote 3, the shieling was a shelter or hut in the upper pastures for which to tend livestock during the summer grazing season. The word itself is related to the Swiss chalet, except it's not as glamorous and is pronounced the same way it is spelled. The next summer, his shieling burned up. 2 winters later, the outhouse at the main farm burned to the ground, and from one end to the other. Ibjal was nowhere near these structures when he caught fire, but he looked suspicious and obviously had an evil eye, so he was blamed. He was held to be no better than a thrall and given work to suit such a station. At his 16th winter, he burned down Einar's house and left obscurity forever, seldom to return. A woman's honor. Ibjal wandered around for several days looking for an opportunity to knock. He continued until he fell in with the pond. Footnote 4. Yes, that's what it says. A woman of about 16 summers and a few winters too had previously fallen in with the same pond and was bathing. Ibjal was immediately struck by the whiteness of her arms. He was also struck with her fist and kicked with her feet and berated with her tongue. Her father and brothers were powerful men in the district, she declared, and he would now see about that. Ibjal said, "About what?" and then made up a short poem to explain his situation, which was neither very good nor memorable and is not recorded here. As it happened, her father, Hrolf the Stoop, and her brothers came riding by at that moment and asked her, whom Ibjal learned was Halla, why she had fallen in with the pond and a disreputable characters whose eyes looked funny. "This is my affair," declared Halla, "and you are welcome to stay out of it." "If this is an affair," her brother Bjarndor said, "you're deep into it by now." Her other brothers, Hjaldur and Bjakdor, agreed. However, Hjaldur argued that it was really a pond. Hrolf the Stoop decided to settle the matter. "Kill the stranger and settle the matter," he suggested. His 3 sons advanced on Ibjal in the pond, and he was trying his best to stay out of it. "Father," cried Halla, "would you kill him just to spite me?" "For want of a better reason, that one will do," he observed. "Then I shall marry him or drown myself by falling in with the pond." "Well," replied her father, "there is no telling the mind of a woman. He's yours." Hrolf the Stoop turned to Ibjal and asked, "What is your name and how much will you pay in bride price?" Ibjal announced his name and told them he didn't want her. "What?" cried Hjaldur. "You insult our sister's honor?" Ibjal said that his sister appeared to be a maid of great honor. Bjarndor hefted his spear and asked if Ibjal thought Halla ugly. Ibjal replied that she was most fair and her looks would undoubtedly improve with age. Bjakdor, who was now the closest brother, leveled his sword at Ibjal's navel and asked if he might reconsider the marriage. Ibjal stated that he was sure he would enjoy many happy years together, but he, a penniless wanderer, regretted the lack of sufficient bride price. The 3 brothers then took his sword, belt, and purse and displayed them to their father, who pronounced it sufficient and welcomed him into the family, saying that they really needed someone like him to tend the sheep and feed the swine, since the bear ate the thralls except for the ones who were carried off by the cough this spring, or the ones killed in the blood feud with the Seton sons. Halla was shiftless, so they tossed hers from the bank and then returned to their farm, Doorway, to prepare the wedding feast. The wedding at Doorway in Norway. Hjaldur and Hjaldur were waiting for them at the front door of their dwelling. They told their father Hrolf that the Seton sons had stolen a wether and asked him who the stranger was with the funny-looking eyes. Hrolf said that his name was Ibjal and that he was their brother-in-law. Hjaldur and said that it was scandalous because he was already their father, and even if he could marry their sister, who was the squinty-looking fellow, while Bjarndor wanted to know whether the wether had been rustled. Bjarkdor said that the weather was looking fine to him, while Hala was making her second impression upon Eibjorl in a most physical way by prodding him through the building entrance with Hjöldor's spear. Hjöldor's wife would have intervened at this stage and settled the confusion, for she was very wise and well remarked upon by the people who knew her. But she had died some 2 years before, and so is out of the saga. Hjöldor asked his father why he wanted to be known as Eibjorl, and then led the long discussion of names and derivations and lists of ancestors, which would require extensive footnotes, and so this is not included in the saga. Eventually, all parties were fully identified and the pending nuptials pinpointed as the primary subject, and it was suggested that they should hold a wedding feast that would be well remembered throughout the district, but not to spend too much money on it. Thus it was decided to gather all of the friends and relatives together and then invite the Seton sons and ask them whether they might perhaps bring a little mutton. It was Eibjorl, so that Eibjorl could become more acquainted with his beloved. She was assigned to supervise his daily tasks around the farmstead. As he swilled the swine or weeded the fields, she constantly instructed him on the proper way to perform these tasks and corrected his own inefficient and mistaken ways. One of her brothers was always in earshot, and should she fall silent, her sibling would move a little closer to assure her safety, but this seldom happened. When a brother was not available, Eibjorl was sent to deepening an interminable series of wells on the farmstead. At last the time of the wedding came, and all came except the Seton sons. Eibjorl and Hala were blessed with a hammer, which Hala repeatedly told all who would listen was appropriate because she was still going to knock some few more rough edges off of her spouse. Eibjorl said that he might have a little hammering of his own to do, which was widely misinterpreted, leading to sly winks and nudges among the guests who had not made too close an acquaintance with the nuptial couple. When everyone had eaten and drunk their fill, and then eaten and drunk far more than was good for them, they all went outside to dance or fall down as each saw fit.
Oh man, the Icelandic sagas.
As the sun was going down,
Translated.
the Seton sons arrived. Gorm, Glum, and Gorp each had a large quarter of beef strapped to their saddles. "We haven't any mutton," explained Gorm, "so we thought that we thought you would wish some ox for your feast." Hrolf the Stoop whispered to Bjarkdor to go and count the cattle in the byre. In this, he was not too wise, for Hjöldor had bitten off Bjarkdor's little finger, and when he was young, and this confused him and his counting, even though he was not in a hurry. There were 10 cattle in the byre, but Bjarkdor thought that this might be 9, and so informed his father that one was missing. The Seton sons still sat in their saddle as dusk progressed, waiting for some word of welcome. "If you are going to steal one of our cattle, at least you could bring all 4 quarters back," said Hrolf, "and I don't see the weather at all." "Say what?" said Gorm, looking up. Bjarndur glanced over at Eibjorl and said that he thought one probable thief at a wedding was quite enough, and they didn't need 3 proven ones. Glum, who was nearest, took some small offense at this, and having his quarter of beef at hand, heaved it at him, but Glum couldn't hit a Bjarndur on a good day, and this wasn't, and so he missed. Hala was never one to stay out of things, accusing them of several indecent things regarding the stolen sheep, and then hoisted her clothing and exposed her backsides to them. Eibjorl took this as an opportunity to slide around to the far side of a tree that they had been sitting under, so he was not in the way of the proceedings. Gorm was amused and vaguely offended by this display by Hala, and so spurred his horse over to her and whopped her on the backsides with his quarter of beef, knocking her to the ground. A guest then heaved a lamb cutlet at him, striking him in the head, and the guest was struck down with Gorp's handy haunch. Soon the air was filled with cries of anger, rage, and dismay, and briskets, chops, and various cuts of meat, until Gorm said, "Yeah, you can't catch us," and the Set and Sun spurred their horses away, leaving their beef behind them. Everyone agreed that this was indeed one of the most memorable wedding feasts that they had attended, and they ate and drank some more until they collapsed in a general stupor. Eibjorl, who for his own reasons had been moderate in his imbibement and consumption of the comestibles, started to slip away in the dark, but Hala's hand snatched at his ankle and dragged him down. There under the tree, and her careful, continuous, and critical instructions, the marriage was consummated. Eibjorl suspected that it would last many long, long years. A child. Eibjorl the Squinty and Hala Loosehems had several issues, some of which were children. Their first daughter was named Glunt, for that was the first word she learned, since she preferred to play with the young pigs in the byre. And on the whole, the pigs tolerated her far better than her family did, especially after she had been hanging around with pigs all day. Glunt grew up strong and omnivorous and very fair, and more fair than one might imagine. She had a genuine talent for raising swine and a rumored dose of second sight. She married a local farmer whom she helped to prosper with their talents and hard work. They had many fine children, and it is said that they were the only members of the family to make anything of themselves. Some more children. Eibjorl and Hala had some more children. Egil the Pure was well liked throughout the district and was fair of face and judgment, but he died without issue, being so nice as to never raise one. Thud showed some promise with livestock, but apparently promised too much and ran off with some of the sheep, and neither this Saga nor any of his friends will have any more to do with him.
He ran off with some of those sheep.
The last-born son, Kettle, was always running into doorposts and tripping over the fire pit. So Rolf the Stoop's youngest son, Skip, yes, they lived at doorway, and Eibjorl sincerely hoped that the cough or the Set and Sons or bears or something would come along and clear the waters of the well-braided lines of inheritance. Who was an unmerciful tease, called him Kettle Oafish. Much to everyone's surprise, Kettle grew up into a stout, strong, patient fellow who forgot nothing, and one day, many years later, Skip found himself at the wrong end of the anchor road in very deep, cold water. But that story is found in this tragic conclusion of Skippy's saga, which everyone has heard or maybe even read, and I've not the time to go into it here. Kettle Oafish was not on the voyage when this happened, but was known for his ability to make many, many loyal friends. A great gap in the record, because I ain't written it yet. Where's my tea? Ah, here we go.
That's a toast right there.
I don't have anything to drink.
I'll toast the Barbara crack.
Oh no! My leg is slightly wet.
1,000 years later, the story is still really funny.
Of course.
Isn't it scary?
Who's right?
The birth of Bent Njal. It is said that the birth of Bent Njal was foretold by many portents, comets and strange creatures from the sea, crop failures and monstrous births of two-headed chickens, cats meowing and roosters crowing. These are tales told by envious neighbors who never liked our family, nor anybody we were associated with. Nonetheless, Kettle took a wife and would not give her back, and they had a son and several other children who were better. She was named...
Better than what?
Better than the sun, duh.
She was named Thedegunda, after one of the 6 women her father almost married on his many travels, and was later known as the wise and somewhat fair. But this was much later, and the birth of Bent Njal happened at the farm in obscurity south of Trondheim during a storm of momentous commonness for the time of year and location. The midwife was early and was greeted with mead, and somehow everything took a long time, and mead was both celebratory and effective as a painkiller, and perhaps too many people were killing too much pain, and to make a long story longer, Kettle also partook partook of far too much mead, and when Njal was born and handed to him, he fumbled the baby, and thus was Njal bent.
But it's such a good pun.
You're geesy, you're okay.
Well, said Kettle, I thought I had him, or you had him, but I guess none of us had him. But he's ours now, so we might as well keep him. So he took the child on his knee and decided to name him. But the woman who had been working on socks while they were working on the birth, and Kettle sat on their work and got stuck with a wooden weaving tool, and this made an impression on him, not to mention a laceration. And he asked what had stuck him and was told, and so that's how Njal was named. The Lady of the Leek. When Njal had ventured to England, he fell in with a lake. This particular lake had a lady associated with it, and it happened in this way. Njal had come ashore in his fairing near a great marsh and decided to scout out the marsh to see if there were any settlements worth bothering. Another great gap in the record. Okay.
Of course.
A voyage for profit. Bent Njal met with Eric Tightfist at the something after the Althing. I would like to sail to Norway, said Njal. Well, I'm not keeping you, replied Eric. Me a reason otherwise. Njal showed him the footnote 6. Once again, the word has been neatly sliced from the manuscript. And Eric could not contain his joy. I have never dreamed of sailing to Norway with such a thing. Not only will it make us wealthy, but it will give us great fame. I don't remember using the term us, said Njal, leaning upon his axe, but I am generous and well-liked, and to win your friendship and services, I will share some of the fame and some of the wealth. So it was agreed that Eric had his ship made ready and swore the crew to secrecy, which wasn't hard to do since nobody had told them anything anyway. He loaded the ship with blankets and cloth, some walrus ivy, and even a narwhal tusk to be sold as a unicorn horn, and this alone would have made a profitable voyage. Humdinger, a powerful man and friend of the King of Norway, sent a white spear falcon and a pilgrim falcon in the care of his son Hawful. At last all was ready, and many people came to watch the leave-taking, glad to see Njal go. Within a fortnight, they made land in Norway and water over the side. Some thought-provoking words. Bent Njal entered the hall to find the queen, Kriemhild the Faircheeks, conversing with several of her husband's retainers and some well-known skalds. She was in the process of telling a very humorous story and followed up with another one just as good. Footnote 7. These two jokes, acknowledged as the most original, hilarious, and ribald in Western literature and oral tradition, are alluded to in several other sources. From Hrafn Saga, it was gleaned that the first had to do with a shark and a house fire, while the second involved casting bronze in a defective clay mold. Although many references to the occasion or extent, the actual jokes have been lost. Njal interrupted her before she could start the third, just as promising story. I don't mean to butt in, your highness, but I wish to speak to you privily, he said. Kriemhild, who was nothing less than sensitive about her attributes, began a flustered reply. Of all the cheek, interjected Njal in a helpful manner. Kriemhild Faircheeks turned her back on him and started to stalk out of the hall. Please, don't leave me behind, cried Njal. The queen spun around, scowling at him. Njal hurried and tried to placate her. There's no need to be so stern, your highness. I'll just wait in the rear of the line. The queen grew livid and shrieked, You intolerable little ass, replied Njal in a self-deprecating way. She stalked down the length of the hall and slapped him. This would have not been too bad, but the queen weighed 15 stone and not a pennyweight less, and Njal went sprawling across the hall, fetching up against the fire pit. When he regained consciousness, he found himself alone in a darkened hall. What did I say? He wondered aloud in an impassive audience of empty tables and benches. He wandered down to the ship to see Eric Tightfist, and what he was doing with their goods. "What did you say?" exclaimed Eric. "The whole town has been saying that you mortally insulted the Queen, and we can expect a visit from some of our more nasty retainers ere long." "Who's Earl Long?" inquired Njal. "Never you mind. Let's get the crew together and shove off. I suspect that a night on the town would lead to an eternity under it." The crew was gathering and the lines were being cast off when Halfdan, son of Ugi, son of Thor, but not the other Thor who was related to Bork and fared eastward, as everybody knows, came down to the quay. "Is there a bent Njal here?" he called out to the crew. "No," they replied in chorus. Footnote S8. SATTBB, which was unusual in those days but very popular when men were men. For the non-musical, that's soprano, alto, tenor, tenor, bass, bass. "No," they replied in chorus. "That's too bad, for I have a purse of silver here for someone who might find him for me." Eric paused and said, "I might have seen him recently." Njal cast off the bow line and started scrambling over the cargo heap amidships. "Well, the Queen would like to see him. She has no business with anyone else except perhaps to bestow rich rewards." Njal cast off the last spring line and seized an oar as he headed for the bow, calling cheerily to the crew, "Come on, lads, off to sea we go. Fresh air, sunshine, bracing salt spray. Rich lands out there, you know." "Looks like an awfully small purse," said Eric as the Nar pivoted away from the quay, propelled by Njal's oar. Halfdan pulled out a bigger purse and dangled it in the air. "That looks much better," responded Eric. "Eric," cried Njal desperately, "if you do not get underway immediately, I shall tell everyone here about the mare, 2 cows, 6 sheep, and the goose." Silence, and Halfdan's jaw hung heavy over the harbor. "Ready your oars and give way," commanded Eric hurriedly. The splash of the oars falling into stroke was the only sound as the vessel parted the calm waters of the fjord. It was then that Halfdan cried out the memorable line, "Njal, come back now, you hear?" Another gap in the record. Not much longer, people.
That's a good one.
It's already been good. Stop!
The Lost Vinland Saga fragment. Bjarni bent down and scooped the dew off the grass and tasted it and declared it was the sweetest in the world. Turkur went him one better and ripped up some grass and declared it delicious. Not to be outdone, Thorolf scooped up some soil where Turkur had been grazing and ate the dirt and declared that the land was his, for it was now part of him. However, his scoop of earth had some bad mushrooms in it, and he died before the night was over. So not only was the land part of him, but he was part of it, and it owned him more than he owned it. And come the resurrection, he will kick himself for doing such a stupid thing, but we will leave that to the Lord Yesu and the angels to sort it out. Amen. The saga is finished, so there.
That was good. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Submitted for the approval of Midnight Society.